Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to a place you've heard a lot about, the Old West. You can probably picture it, wide open plains, horses kicking up dust, saloons creaking under the weight of swinging doors. But trust me, you wouldn't want to actually be there. Imagine dry air so thick with dirt you chew it every time you open your mouth. You wipe your face and feel a gritty paste where your skin used to be. Your nose bleeds for no good reason. And just when you think you've seen it all, a gust of wind slaps you with more dust, because apparently nature hates you. This isn't the glamorous Wild West of movies, it's a harsh, grimy endurance test. You probably won't survive your first week, and if you do, you'll wish you hadn't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to see where and when you're watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You tug your bandana up over your mouth. It helps, barely. Dust swirls around you like a living thing, a storm that's been trying to scratch its way into your lungs since sunrise. Out here, the sky stretches forever, endless blue smeared with gold, but you can't enjoy it. Not when the ground itself is conspiring to bury you alive. Historians still argue whether the worst part was the wind itself or what it carried. Topsoil, bits of dead grass, powdered dung. You're not sure either. You just know that if you ever smile, you're going to crunch down on dirt granules wedged between your teeth. Nice. And don't think you can escape it indoors. Buildings aren't sealed. The dust creeps through the cracks in wood-planked walls, forming little dunes on the floorboards. You could sweep every hour and still walk through a constant haze. Even the towns aren't spared. Boardwalks, muddy main streets, rickety saloons, all smothered in dust. The fancier places might have a carpet, if you're lucky, but guess what? It's just a fancy dust trap. People try tricks to keep the dust down. They sprinkle water on the streets, but that only turns the dust into clingy sludge that sucks at your boots and hardens into cement in the sun. Some shopkeepers hang wet sheets over their doors, a desperate filter to keep the grime out. It doesn't work. You wipe your face again and spit. The blob of mud that lands at your feet confirms it. You've officially been eating the landscape all day. Even breathing is a hazard. Out here, they call it dust pneumonia, and no, it's not just a colorful term. The fine grit settles in your lungs, turning every breath into a slow act of suffocation. There are no antibiotics yet, only hope and maybe a shot of whiskey if you can afford it. Funny thing is, some of the fancier folk tried to avoid dust by wrapping their faces in silk scarves. It wasn't very effective, but at least they coughed more stylishly. You want to sit down, but you hesitate. The chair's likely as grimy as everything else, and when you finally lower yourself, the cloud of dust that puffs up around you makes you cough so hard your ribs ache. At night, it settles a bit, but don't think you're safe. You'll find it in your bedroll, in your hair, in the crack of every finger and toe. No one's sleeping clean tonight. Remember that crocodile dun sunscreen we talked about in another journey? Dust is like that, only you can't wash it off. It clings. It becomes part of you. And just when you think you've gotten used to it, a dust storm rolls in, the kind that blots out the sun and makes even the rattlesnakes burrow underground. Locals call them black rollers, you'll call them pure misery. There's a trick some old-timers use. Rub a bit of animal fat into your nostrils to catch the dust before it gets to your lungs. It helps. A little. Mostly it makes you smell like a side of beef left out in the sun. Historians still debate whether the settlers really had it worse than the native tribes who lived here first. But either way, you're here now, and the land doesn't care if you're a greenhorn or a seasoned ranch hand. It's going to wear you down, one dusty mouthful at a time. And tomorrow? You get to wake up and do it all over again. Dust in your teeth, in your hair, in your soul. You wake up groggy, the thin film of dust still clinging to your face like a second, grimier skin. Your tongue scrapes against the roof of your mouth, dry, rough, and coated. You stretch, creaking like the warped floorboards beneath you, and shuffle toward what might be the biggest gamble of the day, finding water you can actually drink without, dying. You already know the drill. There's no sink waiting for you with fresh, sparkling water. No faucet at all, really. Just a barrel out back, catching rainwater, if you're lucky enough to get rain, or a well, if you're in town and the locals haven't poisoned it yet by dumping waste too close. If you're camped out somewhere, it's even worse. You're eyeballing stagnant ponds where cattle bathe and snakes nap. Bottoms up? Historians still argue whether the biggest killer of the Old West was gunfights or contaminated water. Spoiler, it wasn't bullets. Dysentery, cholera, typhoid, these were the true outlaws roaming the prairie, invisible and unstoppable. You dip a tin cup into the barrel, watching the cloudy liquid slosh around, tiny bits of something, better not to ask, bobbing on the surface. Maybe it's just dirt. Maybe it's not. You smell it. Big mistake. It stinks like something crawled in and gave up. Your stomach tightens. They used to say you could purify water by adding a few drops of whiskey. Might kill a few bugs. Or you might just be drunk and hydrated enough not to care anymore. Boiling it is another option, assuming you have time, wood, and aren't too thirsty to wait. Some frontier towns hired a water witch, a local who claimed to divine water sources with a forked stick. Real scientific stuff. Historians still debate if any of them actually found water or if they just got lucky. Either way, when water is life or death, you don't have time to argue. Even rivers aren't safe. Sure, they look pretty, flowing and fresh, but upstream some cattle rancher is probably dumping waste, or a mining operation is leaking all kinds of delightful chemicals into it. Your choices are simple: drink and risk disease, or don't drink and definitely die. And no, if you thought bottled water could save you, sorry, no Evian delivery out here. Some travelers tried desperate tricks, like mixing bad water with coffee grounds or even chewing on tree bark to suck out moisture. Desperate times, desperate measures. You spot a sign tacked to the saloon wall, water 5 cents a bucket. You're outraged until you remember, you don't have 5 cents. Guess it's back to rain barrel roulette. You finally force yourself to take a sip. It's warm, metallic, and somehow tastes both slimy and dusty at the same time. You gag, but keep drinking. The human body can survive weeks without food but only a few days without water. That, my friend, is the devil's bargain of the Old West. Some settlers tried to dig wells, but the deeper you go, the harder the work, and the greater the chance you strike brackish, mineral-heavy water instead of something drinkable. Hard water, they called it. It builds up in your kettle, clogs your pores, and makes your hair feel like hay. But hey, better mineral overload than cholera. You wipe your mouth and sit back, trying not to think about the gamble you've just taken. As you stare out over the dusty horizon, your guts gurgle ominously. Too late now. And by the way, don't think bathing will save you. Most folks bathe once a month if they're lucky, and only if they can spare the water. You're part of the ecosystem now. Dirt outside, dirt inside. Just pray you didn't pick up Giardia from that cup. If you did, you'll find out soon enough. In the most unpleasant way imaginable. Out here, they say water's worth more than gold. And after a single mouthful of Old West hydration, you're starting to understand why. You try not to think about the water sloshing in your stomach as you stand, brushing yourself off, well, mostly just rearranging the dust. It's time to figure out what to wear today. You head over to the single trunk that holds all your worldly possessions, flip it open, and sigh. Inside, your options are familiar, because they haven't changed in days. Or weeks. Laundry? Not a thing. Not really. Not when soap is expensive, water is scarce, and labor is precious. Most folks out here wash clothes when, and only when, they can't stand the smell of themselves anymore. You grab the least stiff shirt and give it a shake. Dust clouds poof out, coating your arms, settling back into the room like a gentle, filthy snow. Historians still argue whether cowboys really wore the flashy, rhinestone-studded outfits you see in movies. Sorry to break it to you, they didn't. What you get is wool, denim, and cotton, all heavy, scratchy, and stubbornly grimy. Color palette? Dirt, more dirt, and faded ghost of blue. Your socks, assuming you have any, are crusted with sweat and dust, stiff enough to stand on their own. As for underwear, well, some skipped it altogether. One less thing to wash. You pull on your trousers, yanking them over the dust film still stuck to your skin. There's a faint, sour smell rising from the fabric. You shrug. Everyone smells like that. It's the smell of survival. If you're lucky, you own more than one set of clothes. But most folks? One work outfit, one Sunday best, which might just mean a shirt with fewer holes, and that's it. No closets, no chests of drawers, no shopping sprees. And washing those clothes? Prepare for a process that makes you miss modern laundromats more than you thought possible. If you're near a river, you might bash your garments against the rocks with lye soap, a caustic mess made from animal fat and ashes. Gentle on fabrics? Nope. But effective on filth, sort of. Mostly it just shifts the dirt around and wears the fabric thin until it disintegrates. Progress. Some towns had communal washhouses, but they were luxury. And public wash days turned into gossip sessions where everyone learned your business. There was even a technique called dry cleaning back then. No fancy chemicals, just beating your clothes with a stick to knock the worst of the dust loose. Fancy, right? If you had money, maybe you'd pay a laundress. Many were immigrant women who toiled day and night for pennies. They soaked clothes in boiling water with strong soap, scrubbed them raw on washboards, and hung them on lines, praying a dust storm didn't undo their work before the clothes dried. Quirky fact? Some frontier women used urine as a cleaning agent. Ammonia content, you see. The smell was legendary, and not in a good way. Historians still argue whether this was common practice or one of those last resort things no one liked to talk about. As you finally pull on your coat, stiff at the elbows, threadbare at the cuffs, you realize it doesn't really matter how clean you start the day. You'll end it looking exactly the same, dusty, smelly, and probably with a few new mystery stains. And forget changing every day. Most wore the same outfit for weeks on end, adding layers in winter and subtracting them in summer. Deodorant? Not invented yet. Best you can do is sprinkle yourself with talcum powder if you have it, or maybe dab a little rosewater behind your ears if you're feeling fancy. Spoiler, you're not. You tuck your bandana around your neck, not just for looks, but to pull up over your mouth when the dust kicks up. Practical fashion. It's also great for hiding the fact you haven't shaved or washed your face properly in days. You tug your hat low over your brow, squint against the sun, and step outside. You don't look good. No one does. Out here, survival isn't about looking your best, it's about not looking like you're dying. And some days, even that's a tall order. You make it a few steps down the main street before the familiar, unpleasant pang hits you, the call of nature. And out here, that call is not one you can put on hold. There are no sparkling restrooms with mint-scented soap. No polished tiles. No flush handles. Just you, a wooden shack, and a grim sense of resignation. You head toward the outhouse behind the saloon, each step heavier with dread. The structure leans like it's trying to escape its own smell, a crooked box of splintered wood barely held together by rusted nails. You approach cautiously, scarf pulled up high, hat tipped low, trying to armor yourself against what's coming. Historians still argue whether the outhouses of the Old West were worse than those in medieval Europe. Tough call. At least in medieval times, you could blame the castle walls for the smell. Here, it's all on you, and the 10 or so people who used it before you today. You push open the door and gag. The air inside is thick, heavy, almost physical. You swear it brushes against your skin as you enter, like some vile ghost. You hold your breath, but it doesn't help. Your eyes water anyway. The floorboards creak underfoot, and you try not to look down. There's a reason. One unfortunate step off center, and well, you've heard the stories. Some folks misstep and fall through, landing in what the polite folks call the pit, and the impolite folks? They just call it the worst day of your life. The seat is a plank with a hole cut in it, worn smooth by decades of reluctant use. You hover rather than sit. No one, and I mean no one, wants full contact here. Splinters are the least of your worries. Toilet paper? Adorable concept. You'll find a stack of old Sears Roebuck catalogs in the corner, pages torn and curled. Effective? Debatable. Pleasant? Absolutely not. And heaven help you if it's summer. The heat amplifies the smell to something close to weaponized. Flies swarm like it's the social event of the season. Mosquitoes lurk in the shadows. Every buzzing sound makes your skin crawl. Quirky fact, some clever settlers tried to combat the smell by tossing lime or ash down the pit after each use. It helped a little. Others planted mint or other fragrant herbs around the outhouse, an early attempt at organic air freshening. Did it work? Not really. It just smelled like mini disaster. Some towns tried to get fancy, offering 2-holers or even 3-holers for communal use. The number didn't matter, the experience was universally awful. And don't even think about going at night. No lamps inside, and you risk stepping on a rattlesnake or worse. Smart folks kept a chamber pot under the bed for nighttime emergencies, but emptying it in the morning? Also your job. Lucky you. Historians still debate whether outhouses were truly safer than going in the bushes. Bears, snakes, and other less than friendly critters loved brushy areas. Pick your poison, splinters and stench, or fangs and claws. You finish your business quickly, or as quickly as you can manage while trying not to breathe, and stumble out into the open air, gasping like you've been underwater. You pull your scarf down, grateful for even the dusty breeze on your face. You stagger back into the street, hands held up from your sides, unwilling to touch your own clothes until you've forgotten what just happened. No sinks. No soap. If you're lucky, maybe a rain barrel you can dip your hands in. But mostly, you just wipe your palms on your trousers and move on with life, a little filthier, a little more humbled. You might have thought the Old West was all gunfights and glory, but out here, winning the day means surviving the outhouse lottery without losing your lunch, or your dignity. And the worst part? You'll have to go again tomorrow. You try to shake off the memory of the outhouse as you wander back toward the main street, but your gut twists again, this time not from the stench. It's a low, dull throb in your jaw, radiating into your temple. You rub at it absently. Toothache. Nothing spectacular yet, just that ominous pulse that says, hey, guess what's about to ruin your life? You should be worried. Dental care in the Old West? Practically a death sentence. Historians still argue whether dentists were more dangerous than gunfighters. On balance, the six-shooter might have been kinder. You squint down the street. There's a barber's pole spinning lazily in the wind, red and white stripes twisting in the hot air. That's your best bet. You see, in the Old West, barbers often doubled as dentists. A haircut, a shave, a tooth extraction, all in one handy stop. The barber's chair wasn't much different from the dentist's, slightly reclining, padded with cracked leather, and capable of causing great, life-altering pain. No anesthetic. No sterilized instruments. Just a pair of iron pliers, a strong grip, and maybe, if you're lucky, a shot of whiskey beforehand. If you're unlucky, 2 shots after, to dull the memory. You think about your options. Ignore the pain and hope it goes away. Spoiler, it won't, or take your chances with frontier dentistry. And here's the kicker, even if you manage to find a real dentist, it's not much better. The first American Dental Association wouldn't even form until decades later. Out here, dental education consisted mostly of watching someone else yank teeth and then giving it a go yourself. Apprenticeship, Wild West style. Quirky fact? Some dentists advertise painless extraction, a complete lie based mostly on the strength of the patient's whiskey tolerance. Others tried to use ether or chloroform, but the delivery method was sketchy, and the dosage? A gamble between unconsciousness and never waking up again. You hesitate outside the barber's door. Inside, you know, the smell of blood, sweat, and something faintly medicinal, probably carbolic acid, waits for you. Men sit slumped in chairs, faces pale, cradling bloody handkerchiefs. You back away. Maybe later. Maybe not at all. Instead, you think about preventive care, the old frontier way. Baking soda, if you could get it, worked as a crude toothpaste. Otherwise, people chewed on twigs or rinsed their mouths with salt water, assuming they had access to either. Sugar was expensive and rare, which should have helped dental health, but a lifetime of gritty food and no real oral hygiene meant that, by your 30s, you could expect a mouthful of rot. False teeth? Available, if you were wealthy and didn't mind teeth yanked from dead soldiers or prisoners being hammered into your mouth on a crude plate of ivory or wood. They didn't fit well, they didn't look good, and they smelled terrible. But hey, at least you could gum your jerky in style. Historians still debate whether frontier folk really cared about appearances. Most seem to agree that function mattered far more than fashion. If you could chew, you were ahead of the game. If not, soup it was. You try to focus on something else as the throbbing in your jaw worsens. Maybe chewing some soft pine resin, like the native tribes did, could help. Maybe not. You think about holding a hot poker to the side of your face. That's what some folks did for pain, blister the skin to distract from the deeper agony. Frontier multitasking at its finest. For now, you settle for a grimace and a muttered curse, feeling every jolt as you walk. Every step jars your skull, sending fresh jolts of misery through your jawbone. It's a slow, inevitable countdown to the moment you'll have no choice but to sit in that barber's chair and hope he's having a good day. Out here, you learn quickly, bad teeth can kill you. Infection spreads. Abscesses form. No antibiotics to stop it, no clean surgical suites to save you. Just you, your agony, and a man with pliers who's more used to trimming sideburns than saving lives. You tug your hat lower and keep walking, jaw clenched tight against the pain. It's just another day in the Old West. And your teeth? They're not coming with you into the future. You wince with every step, the toothache throbbing like a heartbeat in your skull. To distract yourself, you think about breakfast. Maybe, just maybe, you'll find something to eat that won't crack the rest of your teeth into splinters. But hope is a dangerous thing out here. You shuffle toward the local eatery, a dusty shack optimistically called the dining hall, a few boards nailed together, a swinging door, and a sign hanging lopsidedly that looks like it's given up trying to advertise. Inside, you find a few rough-hewn tables and a chalkboard with today's menu scrawled across it: beans, bacon, hardtack. Again, you sigh. Variety isn't really the spice of life in the Old West. You slump into a chair and brace yourself. The server, a woman who looks like she hasn't smiled since Lincoln was president, plunks a tin plate down in front of you. You stare. A few grayish beans, a slice of bacon so thin you can see through it, and a chunk of hardtack. Historians still argue whether hardtack was invented to punish soldiers or just torture settlers for sport. Either way, it's not food, it's dental warfare. This isn't bread, it's a weapon-grade biscuit. Rock hard, flavorless, and probably older than you are. You wrap it against the table leg and listen to the thunk. Softening hardtack usually means soaking it in coffee, but good luck finding a fresh brew. More likely, you'll gnaw at it until either it gives way or your jaw does. You eye the beans suspiciously. They're more water than bean, swimming in a thin broth that smells vaguely of feet. Best not to ask. You nudge the bacon. It's the best thing on the plate, which isn't saying much. Salt-cured and dry, it's been hanging in the back room for who knows how long, attracting flies and soaking up the kitchen's delightful perfume of grease and despair. If you're lucky, and you're not, you might get some bread, but watch out, weevils. Yes, tiny bugs that worm their way through flour and grain. Frontier folk got used to them. Protein, they joked. You close your eyes and take a bite. Crunch. Probably just the hardtack. Probably. Quirky fact, some settlers used bacon grease not just for cooking but also as a boot polish, leather conditioner, and occasional hair pomade. Multi-purpose and guaranteed to make you smell like breakfast all day. Coffee arrives next, or at least something pretending to be coffee. It's a thick, sludgy brew boiled within an inch of its life, the grounds floating freely. No filters, no cream, and definitely no sugar unless you've robbed a train recently. It's more like bean-flavored water seasoned with ashes. Some old-timers even threw a pinch of salt or crushed eggshells into the pot to cut the bitterness. It didn't help. Historians still debate whether the frontier diet was better or worse than a prison menu. Nutritional value was a secondary concern, survival was the goal. Fresh produce? Rare. Fruit? If you found an apple, it was probably dried, shriveled, and had the texture of leather. You grimly chew your way through the meal, feeling your jaw scream in protest with every bite. But food is food. It's energy, and you'll need it. The Old West isn't kind to the weak or the picky. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve, no napkins, and lean back. Your stomach gurgles a warning. It's not done negotiating this meal. Out here, food poisoning is a regular hazard. Kitchens are primitive, food storage non-existent, and health inspectors? Not a thing. If you get sick, you're on your own. Maybe it's just bad beans. Maybe it's botulism. No use worrying now. You toss a few coins on the table, a small fortune for a meal that would make a stray dog think twice. As you step back into the sunlight, your stomach lurches. Great. Breakfast might not stay long. But hey, at least you've had your daily allowance of dirt, bugs, and regret. You clutch your stomach as you stumble down the street, trying to ignore the uneasy sloshing and churning from breakfast. Maybe it'll pass. Maybe not. Either way, you've got bigger worries. Everywhere you look, people are coughing. Deep, rattling, lung-emptying hacks that leave them doubled over, spitting into the dirt. Out here, that sound isn't just common, it's the background music of daily life. Welcome to the Old West, where disease has a permanent seat at the table and you, my friend, are already invited. Historians still argue whether cholera or tuberculosis claimed more lives on the frontier. The only thing everyone agrees on is that both were merciless. Cholera could wipe out entire towns in a week, sweeping through on the back of tainted water and unwashed hands. One minute you're fine, the next you're doubled over in agony, and the next, well, there's a pine box with your name on it. And tuberculosis? That was the slow killer. They called it consumption, a poetic name for a miserable death. You'd waste away, coughing up blood, cheeks hollowing, eyes sinking. The captain of all these men of death, one writer called it. You'd be carried off to some chilly grave long before you saw old age. You tug your scarf a little tighter over your mouth. It won't help. Germ theory is still a radical idea, and hygiene practices are, let's say, enthusiastic but misguided. People think fresh air cures everything, which sounds nice until you realize fresh means swirling with dust, dung particles, and whatever the guy coughing his lungs out next to you just expelled. You glance over at the so-called hospital, really just a converted house with a red cross crudely painted on the door. Inside, it's all creaky beds, stained sheets, and doctors whose most sophisticated tools are bone saws and bloodletting knives. Quirky fact, bleeding a patient was still a go-to remedy for just about everything, from headaches to fevers. Feeling sick? Lose a pint of blood. Feeling weak? Congratulations, here's another pint gone. Historians still debate whether this was better or worse than doing nothing at all. Either way, the patient usually didn't walk out. And if you think vaccinations will save you, think again. Smallpox vaccines existed, sure, but they weren't always available, and the process involved scratching your arm open with a filthy needle. Good luck dodging infection from that. Malaria roams in swampy areas. Typhoid lurks in your drinking water. Diphtheria, measles, and whooping cough pass around town like party favors. And there's no penicillin, no Thor fluids, no ventilators. Just whiskey for pain, prayers for luck, and a pine box when neither works. You watch a wagon rumble past, a grim canvas covering the bed. You don't have to guess what's underneath. The undertaker's doing brisk business, and he'll even throw in a pair of boots if you can't afford a proper burial suit. Death is a booming industry here. People swap home remedies, of course. Onion poultices. Snake oil, yes, literal oil from snakes, though most bottles contain more turpentine than serpent. Herbs gathered from the hillsides. Most of it does nothing. Some of it actively makes things worse. Quirky fact, one popular cure-all was a mixture called blue mass, essentially mercury pills. Yes, mercury. You might feel better for a while before your teeth fell out and your brain turned to mush. You take a deep breath and instantly regret it. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, horse dung, and something sweet-sour that your stomach recognizes with a twist, decay. You tug your scarf higher. Not that it helps much. You can't stop the thought that creeps into your mind. If you get sick here, you probably won't get better. Best case scenario, you get strong enough to move on to the next miserable day. Worst case, you become a nameless grave under a crooked wooden cross, forgotten before the dirt settles. You wipe your sweaty brow and keep walking, your footsteps dragging a little more heavily. Out here, death isn't a possibility, it's a promise. It's just a question of when. You shuffle onward, dodging wagon ruts and stepping around suspicious puddles that probably aren't just water. Maybe today's the day you find some peace, some quiet corner of the frontier that doesn't reek of disease or despair. You glance around at the low, dusty buildings, the saloon, the general store, the blacksmith hammering away, and you wonder, where's the law? Spoiler, if you're counting on the sheriff to keep the peace, you're in for a bad time. Historians still argue whether the Old West was truly lawless or just badly policed. Either way, it wasn't the noble, orderly frontier you've been sold in storybooks. No gleaming badges and fair trials here. More often than not, law enforcement was one grumpy guy with a tin star, a shotgun, and a loose definition of justice. You spot the sheriff's office, a sagging building with barred windows and a sign hanging askew. A horse dozes in the shade, reins tied to a post that looks ready to fall over. You peer inside. Empty. Figures. The sheriff's probably at the saloon, or worse, napping under a tree. If something goes wrong, and it will, you're basically on your own. Quirky fact, a lot of sheriffs were part-time. They might also run the general store or the local livery stable. Lawman by day, horse trader by night. Conflict of interest? Absolutely. Did anyone care? Not really. And even if you found the sheriff, his authority only stretched as far as his reach. Outlaws? Not the dashing, misunderstood rogues from Hollywood. Real ones were nasty, brutal men who thought nothing of robbing, beating, or worse. Gangs like the James Younger Gang terrorized towns, and most lawmen were too underfunded, outgunned, and plain scared to stop them. Sometimes towns hired vigilance committees, basically, roving mobs who decided they'd had enough and took the law into their own hands. Historians still debate whether vigilantes saved towns or just traded one brand of terror for another. You walk past a notice board plastered with wanted posters. Scowling faces, rough sketches, rewards scrawled underneath. Dead or alive, mostly. Alive was optional. Justice was often quick, brutal, and public. Hanging trees weren't just landscape features, after all. You step into the saloon, partly for shade, partly for curiosity. It's noisy, smoky, crowded. Men slam down whiskey shots, cards slap onto scarred tables, and a player piano wheezes in the corner. You spot him, the sheriff, slouched over a glass, badge pinned crookedly to his vest, revolver loose in its holster. He catches your eye, shrugs, and goes back to his drink. Message received, handle your own problems. And let's not even get into the duels. Historians love to argue whether quick-draw showdowns were common or mostly myth. Truth is, they were rare, but violence wasn't. Fistfights, knife fights, ambushes in the dark, those were everyday events. No countdowns, no honor, no high noon. If someone had a grudge, they didn't wait for theatrics. They just acted. You lean against the bar, order a whiskey, cheap, harsh, and not actually helping your toothache, and glance around. The saloon isn't safe either. Brawls break out over nothing. Someone cheats at cards, someone else gets a little too friendly with someone's girl, and suddenly tables are flipping and glass shatters. The barkeep nods toward the back door. If you're looking for trouble, he mutters, won't take long, you believe him. Outside, the street looks deceptively calm. But you know better now. Law and order out here is more suggestion than reality. And when trouble comes, and it will, no one's riding in to save you. You finish your drink, grimacing. In the Old West, survival isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about who's quickest, meanest, and luckiest. And today, you're not feeling particularly lucky. You leave the saloon with your nerves jangling, the sun slapping you back into the day's unforgiving brightness. As you head down the splintered boardwalk, you notice the women moving about the town, heads down, skirts heavy with dust, arms burdened with baskets or buckets. No fluttering parasols or flowing satin gowns here. These women are working, and working hard. You may have pictured women in the Old West in colorful saloon dresses, leaning coyly against the bar. Maybe you imagine them stepping daintily off stagecoaches with tiny embroidered boots. Sweet fantasy. The reality? Women's lives out here were a relentless grind. Historians still argue whether frontier women had more freedom compared to their city-dwelling counterparts. Sure, they could own land, run businesses, even shoot a gun better than most men. But the price was steep, bone-crushing labor from sunup to sundown, day after day. You pass a woman beating dust out of a rug with a stick, her arms moving like pistons. Another struggles with a stubborn mule, coaxing it to haul a wagon load of firewood. Another kneels at a washtub, raw-knuckled, scrubbing clothes in gray water that's been reused a few too many times. Inside those rough cabins, women are cooking meals over smoky stoves, patching threadbare clothes, grinding corn into meal, tending to screaming children, and trying not to die of exhaustion or childbirth, which were more similar than you'd think. Quirky fact, midwives were crucial on the frontier, but not all were formally trained. Some learned on the job, helping deliver babies with nothing but boiled rags and hope. No hospitals, no pain relief beyond biting down on a piece of leather. And if something went wrong, breech birth, hemorrhage, infection, the mother and child were often simply lost. The daily grind didn't end at the doorstep. Women had to guard against prairie fires, snake bites, and bandits. They were expected to stand their ground while their husbands were away for weeks or months at a time. They learned to shoot, to barter, to plow fields and break horses. Feminine delicacy? Not in these parts. And forget beauty products. Maybe some rosewater if they were lucky. Otherwise, it was lard for skin cream and ashes for cleaning their hair. Washing clothes, washing kids, washing themselves, all of it depended on the rare luxury of spare water. Baths were taken once a week, if that, and usually everyone in the family shared the same tub of cooling, grimy water, oldest to youngest. Historians still debate whether women's suffrage gained early traction in the West because of this hard life or in spite of it. Either way, women earned their respect the hard way, through sweat, grit, and sheer survival. You catch a glimpse of a different kind of woman too, one striding down the street in a dress that's too bright, her lips too red. A saloon girl. Not quite the glamorous, corseted fantasy either. Many of them have little choice, pushed west by poverty or worse, lured by the promise of jobs that turned out to be hospitality work. Some married well, others didn't. Some drank hard and died young. The frontier was a place of opportunity, sure, but mostly for hardship. A woman passes by you, balancing a heavy basket of laundry on her hip, barely giving you a glance. Her skin is weathered, her nails broken, her face lined not just from the sun but from the weight of too many bad days. You tip your hat politely. She doesn't smile back. Not out of rudeness, out of sheer exhaustion. Out here, you realize, survival isn't gendered. It's a burden everyone carries, heavy as that basket, relentless as that sun. You keep walking, feeling a little smaller, a little humbled, and with a fresh respect for the women who made this brutal, unforgiving place their home. You trudge on, boots scuffing dust from the street, still mulling over the raw reality of frontier life. A commotion down the way catches your ear, shouts, the thunder of hooves, the sharp crack of something heavy hitting wood. You squint against the sun and see a small crowd gathering near the bank. You know what's happening even before you get close. A robbery. And here's the kicker, this isn't even unusual. Bank robberies in the Old West weren't like the choreographed shootouts you see in movies. No masked gentlemen tipping their hats politely before galloping away into the sunset. Real bank jobs were messy, desperate affairs pulled off by ragged men who had nothing to lose and didn't much care who got hurt. Historians still argue whether bank robberies were as common as legend says. What they agree on is that when they happened, they were brutal and fast. The robbers didn't waste time. No grand speeches, no drawn-out standoffs. Just a blast through the front door, a pistol in the teller's face, and if you hesitated, well, good luck. You edge closer, careful not to draw attention. Two men with scars over their faces, poor disguises, really, are already hauling sacks out the door. Another fires a shot into the air to keep the crowd back. No sheriff in sight, of course. You'd be surprised if he showed up before it's all over, and if he did, you'd wonder whose side he was really on. Quirky fact, most banks had little real security. Vaults were small and often unlocked during business hours. Some towns even posted no gun signs outside banks, not to protect customers, but to prevent robbers from shooting up the place too much and scaring off future business. And here's another nasty surprise, the townsfolk? They're not rushing to help. They're ducking behind barrels, slipping around corners, hiding their faces. No one wants to catch a stray bullet. You can't blame them. Out here, the difference between a bystander and a corpse is usually about 1 second in 10 bad decisions. You watch as the robbers vault onto their horses, kicking up dust as they race out of town, whooping like it's just another Tuesday, which it is. Townsfolk peer cautiously from doorways, muttering about forming a posse that you know will likely fizzle out by sundown. The bank manager staggers outside, dabbing at his forehead with a kerchief. No one rushes to help him either. It's not rudeness, it's realism. Everyone's got their own problems. Historians still debate whether the rise of Pinkerton agents, the famous private detectives, really curbed crime or just pushed it into different shapes. What's certain is that out here, real justice often came too late and cost too much. You linger a moment longer, heart still thudding. Not from excitement, from understanding. Outlaws aren't legends here. They're a fact of life, as common as dust and just as hard to escape. The worst part? This wasn't even the day's biggest threat. Robbers come and go. Disease lingers. Hunger gnaws. And tomorrow, the bank will open its doors again like nothing happened, because what else can they do? You tip your hat lower and move along, just another face in the crowd, already forgotten. The sun climbs higher, turning the street into a shimmering, punishing griddle. You swat at your face, feeling sweat carve muddy trails through the dust caked on your skin. And just when you think it can't get worse, you remember, the weather here is not just unfriendly, it's actively trying to kill you. You don't have a weather app to warn you, no forecast chirping out warnings. Out here, the weather sneaks up on you like an outlaw with a grudge. Historians still argue whether the greatest frontier killer was man or nature. Spend a week out here and you'll lean toward nature without hesitation. Summers bake the land to cracking. Temperatures soar past the limits of comfort, then sanity. There's no shade, the trees are scraggly, the houses offer little refuge, and the wide open plains reflect the sun like a giant skillet. Heatstroke isn't a maybe, it's a when. Winter, on the other hand, is its own brand of nightmare. Blizzards sweep down out of nowhere, walls of ice and snow driven by winds that strip skin off bone. Livestock freeze standing up. People too, if they're unlucky, or just too tired to fight it. And if the temperature swings aren't enough to keep you miserable, let's talk about the real monsters. Tornadoes. Funnel clouds touch down with no warning, ripping through towns like a giant's angry hand. Historians still debate whether tornadoes or prairie fires destroyed more settlements, but either way, you don't want to meet either on a casual stroll. Lightning storms, dry lightning especially, are frequent guests. One bolt in the wrong patch of prairie and you've got a fire racing faster than a man on horseback, devouring grass, homes, and anyone too slow to outrun it. Quirky fact, settlers used to plow fire breaks around their homes, wide, dirt barriers meant to slow fires down. It sometimes worked. Mostly, it just gave them time to load a wagon and run. You squint at the sky. No clouds. No relief. Just that molten, merciless sun. Your clothes stick to you, sweat slicking your back, your hat offering pitiful protection. You think about finding a river or a stream to dunk your head in, but remember yesterday's lesson about water. Not exactly an improvement. You pass a woman standing outside her cabin, ladling water over her roof in a desperate, hopeful attempt to keep it cool. Spoiler, it won't help. At night, it won't be much better. Without modern insulation, cabins become ovens during the day and iceboxes at night. You sleep fitfully, mosquitoes whining in your ears, hoping the roof doesn't blow away in a midnight squall. Historians still argue whether settlers were tougher back then or just had fewer options. Maybe both. All you know is that if the gunmen don't get you, and the disease doesn't, and the food doesn't poison you, the weather is always waiting. You trudge on, feeling the day grind you down, sweat drying into salty crusts on your skin. And you can't shake the feeling that the land itself is watching you, grinning, waiting to see if you'll last another day. Spoiler, odds aren't great. You lean against a post, breathing shallowly, trying not to melt into a puddle under the relentless sun. The saloon's whiskey hasn't helped your toothache, the dust feels like it's caked onto your very soul, and your stomach is still negotiating that breakfast. You need help. Medical help, maybe. But you already know what's waiting for you, not a doctor with a clean white coat and a bag of miracles. No, you get the medicine show. You catch sight of a cart rolling into the edge of town, its paint peeling but still shouting bold promises. Dr. Swain's miraculous elixir cures what ails you. A crowd gathers quickly, folks desperate for anything that might chase away their aches, fevers, or heartbreak. Historians still argue whether medicine shows were the lifeblood or the leeches of the Old West. Maybe a little of both. The doctor leaps from his wagon with theatrical flair, bowing low, hat sweeping the dusty air. He's dressed in a threadbare suit and scuffed boots, but his voice booms with confidence. He promises his tonic cures everything: headaches, rheumatism, indigestion, melancholy, baldness, even lumbago, whatever that is. You know better. Everyone does. But hope is a powerful thing. So is desperation. Quirky fact, most of these miracle tonics were just alcohol, flavored with a little sugar, maybe spiked with opium or cocaine if the good doctor was feeling extra generous. Effective? Sure, you'd feel better, because you were either buzzed, blissed out, or unconscious. You inch closer as the showman produces a bottle, its amber liquid sloshing enticingly. He swears it's brewed with secret herbs from faraway lands. You wonder if those herbs have ever actually met soil. More likely, it's river water, grain alcohol, and a dash of molasses to fool your tongue. A woman steps up, wheezing into a rag, and hands over her few precious coins. She downs a swig, wipes her mouth, and nods. Whether it's relief or the rush of strong liquor, it doesn't matter. She believes. That's good enough for Dr. Swain, who beams and hands out bottles left and right. You hesitate. Your tooth throbs like a war drum. Couldn't hurt worse, right? You reach into your pocket, fingers brushing against a coin, your last one. You hand it over and get a warm bottle in return. You sniff it, smells like turpentine with a hint of desperation. You take a sip. It burns all the way down, and for a moment you can't breathe. Your head swims, your limbs loosen, and, hey, your jaw stops screaming. It's not gone, but it's fuzzy, distant, like someone else's problem now. Dr. Swain tips his hat and launches into a song, plucking a banjo with surprising skill. A few folks clap along. A kid dances a sloppy jig in the dust. For a few minutes, it feels almost festive. Almost. But you know better. Come morning, most of those bottles will be empty, the ailments will still be there, and the doctor will be long gone, rattling toward the next desperate town. Historians still debate whether these traveling medicine men were outright con artists or just giving people a little hope when nothing else would. Maybe it's both. Maybe out here, hope, even false hope, is worth the price. You stagger back onto the street, bottle tucked under your arm, jaws still buzzing from the makeshift cure. The sun glares down, the dust swirls, and you remember something someone once said. In the Old West, survival isn't about staying healthy. It's about staying just healthy enough to keep moving. You swig again and wipe your mouth. Yep, definitely turpentine. The tonic sloshing in your stomach gives you a lopsided sense of relief as you trudge along. For a moment, you almost forget the other itch you can't quite scratch, the one crawling under your clothes, up your sleeves, behind your ears. You're not alone. You're never alone. Out here, it's not just the bandits and diseases you have to worry about. It's the things living in your very clothing, your bedding, and, let's face it, your hair. Welcome to your real roommates, lice, fleas, and bedbugs. Historians still argue whether bedbugs were more common in frontier towns or mining camps, but that's splitting hairs, literally. They were everywhere. Boarding houses, saloons, even the fancy hotel if you could afford it. You couldn't escape them. They came free with the pillow, a complimentary gift of life on the edge. You feel a telltale tickle under your collar and scratch without thinking. Bad move. The bugs seem to take it as a challenge. Bedbugs lurk in the seams of mattresses, straw mattresses, mind you, not your plush, pillow top affair. They come out at night, gorging themselves on whoever's unlucky enough to lie still long enough. You wake up covered in itchy welts, scratching yourself raw in your sleep. Lovely. Quirky fact. To fight back, people stuff their bed legs into cans of kerosene or turpentine, hoping to drown the bugs as they climbed. Did it work? Sometimes. Other times it just made the bed smell like a refinery. Lice, meanwhile, didn't even have the courtesy to wait for nightfall. They colonized scalps, nibbled on necks, and spread their itchy empire one head at a time. You could try shaving your hair off, but in the blistering sun, that came with its own set of problems. Hats only made things worse. Dark, sweaty shelters where lice thrived like it was a 5-star resort. And fleas? They were the least picky. They lived in the dirt floors, the wool blankets, the seams of your clothing. One minute you're sitting peacefully, the next you're slapping yourself silly, hopping around like you've lost your mind. Washing helps, sort of. Boiling your clothes in a big kettle might kill the bugs, assuming you can find the water and the firewood in the time. But the next time you walk into a room full of equally unwashed folk, you're back to square one. Congratulations, you're now part of the cycle of endless, crawling misery. Historians still debate whether folks simply accepted the infestation as normal or fought back in vain. It's a moot point. You fight, you lose. Scratch, scratch, scratch. You glance around. Everyone's doing it, subtle itches, vigorous head scratching, desperate swipes at collars and sleeves. No one mentions it. It's too ordinary to bother with. Just another part of the background noise, like the flies buzzing and the coughs hacking from doorways. You head toward the boarding house where you're staying, a one-room setup shared with strangers who snore, cough, and bring their own personal petting zoo of parasites. You glance at the sagging mattress waiting for you, the one with the suspicious stains and the faint but unmistakable movement if you stare long enough. Sleep tight. Don't let the bedbugs bite. Not that you have a choice. You lower yourself onto the creaky bed, resigned. You tuck your hat over your face, pretending it's just dust making your skin crawl, not the endless parade of tiny legs marching across your body. Out here, you think as you scratch a fresh bite, it's not the big things that wear you down. It's the constant little miseries, nibbling away at you, one tiny bite at a time. You barely sleep, twitching and scratching under the thin blanket, listening to the scuttle and chirp of bugs in the walls. At some point, you give up entirely. You sit up, bleary-eyed, and tug on your boots. It's still dark outside, but the air carries a peculiar smell, something sharper than dust, heavier than sweat. You recognize it too late. Smoke. You stumble to the door and fling it open. The night sky glows red along the horizon, and a hot wind licks at your face. Somewhere nearby, something crackles, dry wood catching, the sound of flames chewing through timber like a hungry beast. Fire. Historians still argue whether fires destroyed more frontier towns than outlaws did, But when you're standing here, boots in the dirt, you don't waste time wondering. You just know you have to move fast. Wooden buildings packed close together, dry as kindling, roofs tarred with pitch. This town is a matchbox, and someone's just struck it. You hear shouting now, people rousing from their beds, racing into the street. Buckets are forming a line from the nearest well, but it's a hopeless sight. One tiny stream of water tossed at a wall of flame growing by the second. The fire leaps from building to building like it's in a hurry, glass windows popping in the heat, roofs collapsing with a roar that shakes the ground. Quirky fact, many Old West towns banned cooking fires indoors during dry months, but it didn't stop disasters. A tipped-over lantern, a careless cigar, a stray spark from a blacksmith's forge, that's all it took. You duck back inside, grab your meager possessions, a bedroll, a few coins, that questionable bottle of tonic, and sprint back out. Already the air is thick with smoke, stinging your eyes, searing your lungs. You wrap your bandana around your mouth, but it's a poor filter. Your throat burns anyway. You try to help. Everyone does. Buckets fly. People shout orders no one can hear. Someone tries to tear down a building to create a firebreak, axes flashing in the red haze. It's brave, but futile. The fire moves faster than people, faster than horses, faster than fear. Historians still debate whether these towns ever truly recovered after a fire. Some rebuilt, stubborn and charred. Others simply blew away, abandoned to the prairie winds, forgotten except in yellowed newspapers. You glance toward the livery stable and wince. The horses are screaming. Some are freed, racing wild-eyed down the street. Others, well, you don't think about the others. You just move. A flaming beam crashes down near you, showering sparks. You stumble back, coughing, vision swimming. People rush past, some carrying bundles, others carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs. You catch a glimpse of a woman clutching a crying child, her hair wild, her face smeared with soot. You don't need to be told twice. This isn't a fight you can win. You turn and run, legs churning, lungs heaving. Behind you, the town burns like a bonfire to the stars, the orange glow lighting the landscape for miles. When you finally stop, gasping, bent over with your hands on your knees, you're well outside town. You glance back. The flames are smaller from here, distant, almost beautiful, if you don't think too hard about what's left behind. You sit in the dirt, dazed. Tomorrow, there'll be little left, blackened beams, melted iron, ashes drifting on the wind. Some will stay, rebuild, try again. Some will move on, chase the horizon, the same way they always have. You swig from your bottle. The tonic burns but feels oddly comforting. You're alive. For now. But you can't shake the realization, in the Old West, it's not a question of if disaster strikes, it's when. Dawn creeps up behind you, the sky bleeding from black to gray as the last embers of the town smolder in the distance. You push yourself up from the dirt, muscles stiff, skin gritty with soot. There's no going back to bed, or what passed for one. Instead, you set off down the rutted road, boots dragging, steps slow. Walking isn't a choice here, it's a necessity. And horses? Let's just say the Old West's favorite mode of transportation wasn't as glamorous as the legends make it out to be. Historians still argue whether life on horseback was more freeing or more punishing. Spend an hour in a saddle, and you'll pick a side fast. First, if you think horses were just there for the taking, think again. Horses were expensive, more valuable than some houses. A decent riding horse could cost upwards of $50 or more, a fortune when a day's wage hovered around $1. That's not even counting tack, feed, or the fact that horses, like everything else, had a nasty habit of dying when you needed them most. You trudge past a group of travelers clustered around a lame mare, arguing over whether they can afford to rest or risk moving slower. The horse shifts its weight, miserable, its ribs visible under a too-thin coat. And riding isn't exactly a joyride either. Saddles in the Old West weren't ergonomic marvels. They were hard, unforgiving leather strapped over wood frames. You didn't sit, you braced. Long rides left you bruised, chafed, and sore in ways you don't want to think too hard about. No wonder old cowhands walked bow-legged. Quirky fact, some riders stuffed bits of cloth or even moss under their saddles for extra cushioning. Mostly it just gave them a head start on developing saddle sores. And then there's travel speed. A horse might trot along at about 5 miles per hour, maybe more at a gallop if you didn't mind breaking its legs or your own. Wagons, weighed down with supplies and passengers, crept along at a crawl, about 10 to 15 miles a day if you were lucky and nothing broke. Which it would. You adjust your hat and keep walking, passing a wagon with a busted wheel, its owner cursing softly as he wrestles with the splintered wood. Spare wheels? Not a given. Out here, breakdowns mean waiting for someone else to happen by, assuming they don't just ride past. And horses themselves? Unpredictable. Skittish around snakes, prone to kicking, stubborn as, well, mules. They spook at thunder, bolt at gunfire, and sometimes just drop dead without a hint of warning. No veterinarian, no horse whisperer. You rub a bit of lard on a sore or say a prayer and hope for the best. Historians still debate whether horses were more reliable than stagecoaches, but considering stagecoach travel often meant being jolted like a bean in a tin can for hours on end, there's not much of a winning argument there. You hitch a ride with a man leading a tired pack horse. He offers you the beast's back with a shrug, and you clamber up, settling awkwardly into the sway of its gait. You last maybe a mile before every bone in your body complains. No one tells you about the constant vigilance either. Highwaymen waited along lonely trails, eyes sharp for travelers weighed down with gold or goods. And if you think you'll outrun them, remember, your horse is tired, hungry, and slower than the polished movie versions you've seen. The sun climbs higher, and the dust rises in choking clouds. You shift in the saddle, trying to find a spot that doesn't hurt. There isn't one. You glance back once at the thin, crooked line of smoke still trailing from what's left of the town. Then you face forward again, gritting your teeth. You're not traveling for the thrill of it. You're traveling because, out here, staying put is just another way to die slowly. The day stretches on, a blur of dust and saddle sores. You rock with the horse's stride, each jolt sending new messages of complaint through your spine. Hunger gnaws again, but you're not excited to answer it. You pass a low building with a sagging sign, dining room. Optimistic branding, as always. Your stomach growls in warning as you dismount, your legs wobbly and rubbery. You head inside and brace yourself for another brush with culinary regret. The dining room is little more than a few battered tables, each with a checkered cloth so stained and faded you can barely make out the pattern. Flies buzz lazily, darting from a scrap of something unidentifiable on the floor to a crusty plate on an abandoned table. You sit. A woman ambles over, pad in hand, not that she bothers writing anything down, and recites the menu like it's a punishment. Stew, beans, fresh bread, and today's special, salted pork. You order the stew. Because how bad could it be? Historians still argue whether Old West cooking was innovative or just cruel necessity. What's clear is that taste wasn't the priority. Calories were. The stew arrives. You stare down at a lumpy concoction that smells vaguely like old socks and despair. The broth is greasy, floating with bits of gray meat and a few wilted vegetables that look like they gave up days ago. You poke it with a spoon and something sinks, quickly, out of sight. Probably for the best. You take a tentative sip. It's hot, at least. The meat is chewy, sinewy, and possibly not from anything you'd willingly eat if you knew the truth. Beef? Maybe. Rabbit? Could be. Something you'd rather not name? Highly likely. Quirky fact, frontier cooks sometimes used whatever meat they could trap, shoot, or scavenge, be it squirrel, badger, or even crow. Desperation makes a lot of things seem edible. And seasoning? Salt was king. If it wasn't heavily salted or smoked, it was probably spoiled. You turn to the bread. It looks promising, until you break it open and spot movement. Weevils. Of course. They're small, white, and wiggling with the kind of enthusiasm you definitely don't feel. You sigh and knock the worst of them out onto the floor, watching a chicken wander in and peck them up. At least someone's happy. Historians still debate whether settlers cared about the bugs in their food. Most agree they didn't have much choice. Protein's protein, and removing every tiny pest would leave you with not much bread and even less time. You pick at the pork next, chewing a strip that fights you every step of the way. It's so salty it makes your mouth pucker, your tongue dry. You chase it with a gulp of bitter coffee, thick with grounds, and wonder how many days you're shaving off your life with every bite. If you're feeling fancy, you could try the pie for dessert. But pies out here are filled with whatever fruit's available, often dried apples soaked back to life with dubious water, and the crusts are tough enough to stop a bullet. Plus, more weevils. You swallow another bite of stew and remind yourself this is probably the safest meal you'll get this week. Better questionable meat and bug bread than starvation, right? You push your plate away and toss a coin on the table, rising with a groan. Your stomach gurgles ominously, but it's too late now. Whatever will be, will be. As you step back into the heat and dust, you think, food here isn't about pleasure. It's about survival. And every meal is a gamble between hunger and food poisoning. And today, you're not sure which one you just lost. You stagger out of the dining room, stomach churning, lips still puckered from the salt. The sun hasn't budged. It hangs overhead like a judgmental eye. You squint down the dusty street and catch sight of something straight out of a dime novel. Two men, boots planted, hands hovering near their hips, eyes locked. A gunfight. Now, don't get too excited. This isn't a John Wayne moment. Real gunfights didn't happen at high noon with duels and honor and polite nods. They were ugly, fast, and unfair, just like everything else out here. Historians still argue whether the classic showdown ever truly existed. Evidence points to most gunfights being messy brawls, ambushes, or drunken accidents. If you stood face to face with someone, you were already doing it wrong. The two men square off. A few bystanders lean against posts, pretending not to watch but absolutely watching. No one calls for calm. No one shouts warnings. They just inch away, slow and casual, like cockroaches slipping into cracks. You step back too, careful to stay behind a water trough. It won't stop a bullet, but it makes you feel better. One man, a wiry rancher with a thick mustache, flicks his fingers near his pistol. The other, a stockier fellow with a stained shirt and the dead-eyed stare of someone with nothing left to lose, shifts his weight. Quirky fact, many so-called gunfighters weren't trained sharpshooters. They were nervous, twitchy men firing cheap pistols with poor aim. Most gunfights happened at close range, like 10 feet or less. Accuracy wasn't a given. Luck was. The rancher moves first, jerking for his gun. It catches on his holster. He yanks it free awkwardly, and the first shot goes wild, kicking up a puff of dirt nowhere near the target. The stocky man doesn't hesitate. He fires back twice, quick and ugly. The rancher folds like a wet newspaper. It's over in seconds. No cinematic pauses. No heroic last words. Just a thud and the sound of the stocky man spitting into the dirt before he holsters his pistol. You glance around. No sheriff. No arrests. The crowd disperses, muttering. Someone checks the rancher's pockets before dragging his body toward the edge of town. Might as well see if he's carrying anything worth taking. You grimace but look away. You're learning, out here, survival comes first, and sentiment is a luxury no one can afford. Historians still debate whether these gunfights were about pride, politics, or pure survival. Probably a little of everything. But one thing's for sure, the Old West didn't have time for formalities. If someone wanted you dead, they weren't waiting for a proper duel. You wander toward the spot where the body had fallen. There's a dark stain in the dust, already drying under the sun. No one bothers to clean it up. Dust and hoofprints will erase it soon enough. You shake your head and keep walking. In the movies, the gunfighter rides off into the sunset, hat tipped low, leaving a trail of admiration. Here, the gunfighter gets left in the dirt, and by tomorrow, no one will remember his name. The real Old West didn't hand out legends. It handed out graves. And if you're smart, you'll keep your hand away from your gun and your head down, because out here, the only winners are the ones who live to see another miserable sunrise. The dust settles over the stain in the street as you drift further down the ragged boardwalk, the sun slanting westward, but offering no real mercy. You pull your hat low and keep your head down. Every step feels heavier, not just from the miles, but from the relentless monotony sinking into your bones. The truth hits you harder than the heat. This place isn't just dangerous, it's boring. Historians still argue whether life in the Old West was adventurous or mind-numbingly tedious. Sure, there were gunfights and fires and the occasional bank robbery, but those were the exceptions, not the rule. Day-to-day life? It was a grind of endless, repetitive tasks that made you wish for something, anything, to break the monotony, even if it came with bullets. You sit on the edge of a rickety porch and stare out at the nothingness. The town looks barely awake, even in broad daylight. A dog scratches itself lazily under a wagon. A tumbleweed, almost too on the nose, rolls past like it's got somewhere more exciting to be. You imagine the typical day. Wake up before dawn. Shovel manure. Haul water. Fix a broken fence. Walk 5 miles for supplies you can't afford. Pray it doesn't rain, or worse, Pray it does so your crops won't shrivel into dust. Quirky fact: many pioneers carried books, not just for entertainment, but because they feared the isolation would drive them insane. The Bible, a Shakespeare play or two, maybe a tattered copy of Pilgrim's Progress, those were your Netflix, your Spotify, and your TikTok rolled into one. You glance around for any signs of life. A man snoozes under his hat in a chair tilted against a wall. Another whittles a stick into a smaller stick. Kids kick a flat ball made of stitched leather scraps. It's less wild adventure and more staring contest with death by boredom. The pace is slow because it has to be. Everything takes time. No electricity. No engines, unless you're near a train, and even that's a rare blessing. Even boiling water for coffee is a drawn-out ritual of chopping wood, lighting a fire, and waiting. Historians still debate whether frontier folks truly hated the monotony or simply accepted it as the price of survival. Probably a bit of both. You can't fight what you can't escape. Sundays bring a bit of variation, church service in a one-room shack, hymns sung off-key, and stiff woolen clothes that chafe in the heat. Maybe a social afterward, pie if you're lucky, a little dancing if someone's brought a fiddle. Otherwise, the days bleed into one another, dust-colored and heavy. You watch as a man tries to start a conversation with the blacksmith, who grunts once and goes back to hammering a horseshoe. Even small talk is a labor here. You realize something else. Outlaws, disease, fire, those are immediate dangers. But boredom is the slow killer. It saps your will, drains your hope, turns you into the kind of person who stares blankly at the horizon and forgets what they were even dreaming about. You shift on the porch, stretching legs that feel too tired for how little they've actually done today. The sun dips lower, but the air is still thick, still oppressive. This isn't the adventure you signed up for. This is survival in its most soul-crushing form. Not a thrilling ride, not a dramatic showdown. Just a long, dusty wait for something to happen, something that probably won't. Out here, you start to wonder if dying of boredom might actually be preferable to what the land and life have in store. The sun finally droops low enough to throw long, crooked shadows across the ground, but the air doesn't cool much. You drag yourself off the porch, legs stiff, hat tipped low, boots scuffing through the dust again. You're not sure where you're headed, maybe just moving to feel like you're doing something. Anything. A cluster of kids scampers past you, barefoot and wild-eyed, giggling in that shrill, desperate way only children can manage when the world around them is hard and hollow. You watch them a moment, and that hollow feeling deepens. Because if you think being an adult here is bad, imagine being a child. Historians still argue whether children on the frontier were stronger for their hardships or simply robbed of anything resembling childhood. Looking around, you're leaning hard toward the latter. Most kids here don't get to be kids for long. No schoolhouses with playgrounds, no lazy summer afternoons. Just work. Endless, back-breaking work. Boys start herding cattle or plowing fields almost as soon as they can lift a tool. Girls are put to work cooking, sewing, hauling water, and raising younger siblings before they're out of pigtails. You glance toward a girl, maybe 8 years old, balancing a sloshing pail of water almost bigger than she is. Her arms strain, her face is pinched with concentration. No one rushes to help. No one even blinks. It's just another normal evening chore. Quirky fact: the average life expectancy for children in the Old West was heartbreakingly low. Disease, accidents, malnutrition, there were so many ways a young life could end before it ever really began. A stubbed toe could turn into an infection. A bad cough into a death sentence. And the chores don't stop for illness. Kids work through fevers, sprains, even broken bones if they can manage it. If they can't, well, there's another child waiting to take their place. You pass by what counts as a schoolhouse. One room, a few rough benches, a blackboard so faded you can barely make out the chalk scribbles. If the town's lucky enough to have a teacher, the children cram in there when they aren't needed in the fields or kitchens. School's not a priority, survival is. Historians still debate whether the harshness of frontier life created resilience or just hardened young hearts too soon. There are stories of kids walking miles to school, barefoot through snow, sharing textbooks, writing lessons on slates because paper was too precious to waste. But for most, learning ends early. By the time they're old enough to understand what the world could be, the world has already taken its toll. If you're a boy, you're a farmhand or a ranch hand, or a grave digger, if times are bad. If you're a girl, you're a wife by 14, a mother by 16, and worn thin by 25. You watch another child, skinny as a fence rail, toss a worn ball to a friend, missing by a wide mile. They laugh anyway, a dry, cracked sound. You wonder if they even know what a carefree childhood feels like. Quirky fact, some kids grew up with no toys at all. A stick, a rock, a piece of string, these were treasures. Rag dolls, carved wooden animals, maybe a whittled flute if a parent had time and talent. Mostly, imagination filled in the gaps. You step aside as the children scamper past again, kicking up dust and clumps of dry grass. One boy looks up at you, grin wide and wild, before darting away. That spark of joy, that flicker of light, it's fleeting here. You can already see the hard edges setting in, the way the land and life chip away at them, piece by piece. You sigh and keep walking, the weight of the day heavy on your shoulders. Out here, childhood isn't a phase. It's a race against the inevitable, and most don't win. The horizon bleeds orange and purple as the last light of day finally gives up the fight. You find yourself at the edge of town, staring out at the endless prairies stretching flat and featureless to the ends of the earth. You settle into the dust, arms looped around your knees, and think about all the promises people once made about this land. The American dream, cheap land, wide skies, freedom. But standing here, you can see how those promises unraveled, thread by thread, into something rougher, meaner, and harder than most could ever imagine. Historians still argue whether the Old West really fulfilled its dream of opportunity or if it just swapped one kind of misery for another. The truth, as you're learning, sits somewhere in the dust between. You think about the settlers lured here by posters plastered across eastern cities, fertile land, untold riches, a better life. They came in droves, carrying everything they owned in rattling wagons, believing they'd build empires out of the soil and sunshine. Instead, most found backbreaking labor, endless isolation, and a stubborn land that gave up its bounty only after years of grinding toil. Quirky fact, many settlers actually left the frontier, beaten down and broken, returning to the cities poorer than when they left. Historians call it busted homesteads, failed dreams littering the landscape like the sun-bleached bones of cattle. You glance back toward the skeleton of the town, buildings silhouetted against the fading light, smoke still twisting into the sky from yesterday's fire. It looks peaceful, almost beautiful, if you squint. But you know better. You've seen the sickness, the filth, the fires, the lawlessness. You've tasted the bad water, the worse food, and the dust that seems determined to grind you into the dirt. And yet, tomorrow, people will get up. They'll rebuild. They'll patch up their wounds, scratch meals out of the stubborn earth, and gamble that maybe, just maybe, the next day will be kinder. You take a breath, the air cool now, crisp, almost sharp in your lungs. It tastes like dust and wood smoke and stubborn hope. Because that's the trick of the Old West. It breaks you, but it also dares you to stand up again. You can curse it, fear it, despise it, but you can't ignore it. It's too big, too wild, too indifferent to your suffering to care. And somehow, some stubborn spark in people just keeps trying anyway. You shake your head, a dry chuckle escaping before you know it. No, you wouldn't want to live here. Not for all the cattle in Texas. The Old West doesn't want you comfortable. It wants you tough, or gone. The stars begin to pepper the sky, bright and unblinking, the only witnesses to another day survived. You pull your coat tighter and lean back, staring up at them, wondering how many other tired, dusty souls once sat just like this, dreaming of a future that never quite arrived. And maybe that's the real secret of the Old West. It wasn't about reaching the dream. It was about chasing it, teeth gritted, knuckles white, heart stubborn, all the way into the dust. The sky deepens, slipping from velvet blue to soft black, and the stars begin their slow, ancient shimmer. The night air cools your skin, a soothing contrast to the day's cruel heat. Each breath feels easier now, the sharpness fading into something softer, more forgiving. You stretch out in the dirt, the ground firm and unyielding beneath you, yet somehow reassuring in its solidness. Above, the constellations drift into view, old friends in a place that rarely offers comfort. They blink quietly, patient and eternal, as if to remind you that all this dust, fire, hardship is only temporary. The land grows quiet around you. No gunshots, no coughing fits, no hammering from the blacksmith. Just the soft rustle of the prairie grass and the occasional whinny of a horse settling down for the night. A peacefulness spreads slowly, like a blanket pulled up under your chin. You close your eyes for a moment, letting your muscles loosen, letting your mind drift. Here, in the hush of night, The harshness of the Old West feels far away, tucked into the corners of darkness. You made it through another day. That's enough. Sleep edges closer, warm and slow, cradling you as the stars will overhead. For now, at least, you're safe. For now, you can rest. Sweet dreams.